Good afternoon, everyone. We are just about a minute away from 2 o'clock, so we'll give some more time for everyone to trickle in. In the meantime, feel free to drop in the chat where you are tuning in from. All right, I see more attendees kind of filing in now that we've hit the 2 o'clock mark. We'll give everyone just a few more moments to get situated, but we did launch a poll, so you can check out the poll and please answer that. The poll question is, how do you utilize the donor pyramid in your organization? As you know from the topic, from the title of this webinar, the donor pyramid is something that Shawn will be talking about this afternoon. So just go ahead and answer that quick question, and I will make an introduction probably in the next minute, and then we'll get started. All right, I think we can go ahead and get started for today. So for all of you that have tuned in, I am Melissa. I am the Director of Marketing at DipJar. If you're not familiar with DipJar, we offer a very cool credit card donation device for nonprofit organizations. It makes donating fast, easy, and fun. I love our product and always happy to answer any questions you might have about DipJar, but that's not why we're here today. As DipJar serves the nonprofit community, one thing that we love to do is, bring thought leaders onto our platform to talk about some topics that your organization might be struggling with. And we are pleased to have Shawn here today from boodle.ai. So Shawn, I won't make the introduction for you. You can go ahead and talk about yourself, but please feel free to kick us off with a short intro and we'll dive into today's topic.
Awesome, Melissa. Thank you so much. Really excited to be here. Appreciate the opportunity. Always enjoy talking technology. As background, I am the co-founder and CEO of boodle.ai, and we have a mission to help organizations like those of you on today to achieve and exceed the fundraising potential that's out there. I always like to know when I'm talking to somebody what their background is and why they are available to talk about a particular topic. And I came out of, I studied computer science in school. I will fully admit that the platform we've built was coded by my team. The courses and programming languages I learned in college, they now teach in the history of computers class. But we have an amazing team that has put together a product that Idea being helping organizations raise more efficiently. And I came out of college, went to West Point, and literally the first week after I graduated, went onto my first nonprofit board and was focused on youth education. And for 25 years, I've always served on some sort of youth education. After my time in the Army, have worked with several veteran service organizations. And as the resident tech guy on every board, I was always very frustrated when I would see technology companies come in that had built a solution for the commercial sector and would tell us as nonprofits, hey, circular nonprofits, shove yourself into our square hole. We know what's best for you. And so my co-founder and I really wanted to build a technology that was easily consumable and allowed organizations to raise money more efficiently and effectively at a press of a button. The analogy I like to use is we're all sitting on Zoom today. We have been for the past 2 years. I would bet almost any of you in the crowd a nice bottle of wine and a steak dinner that 90% of the people you've been speaking to on Zoom could not explain to you how video over IP works. But they don't have to, because Zoom's made it the press of a button. And so my co-founder and I wanted to find a way to bring data science and machine learning to nonprofits at the press of a button, because it's not feasible for them, for most of them, 99.9% of them, to hire large teams of data scientists or to hire people with PhDs in machine learning. And so we wanted to be able to put that at the press of a button. Melissa, do you want me to dive in, or is there anything else?
I think that's good. I think we can go ahead and get started.
Awesome. Do you mind going to the next slide?
Yeah.
And one of the big things is, as everybody knows, is one of the most important parts of any campaign you're going to do is the preparation you do. When I started 25 years ago, if we were doing an annual campaign, that preparation typically consisted of a good 3 months of human effort to dig in and really start to look at things and try to understand our donors a little bit better. But the reality is we lost 3 months of an annual campaign of fundraising. Today with technology, you're able to take that 3 months with a machine and compress it down to hours, allowing a development team more time to do what they're good at, which is engaging potential donors. Next slide, please. Now, as you all know, the donor pyramid has been around for a long time. I'll admit, in the probably half dozen nonprofit boards I've served on, only one has actually really used the donor pyramid as this chart, but every organization used some form of the donor pyramid to track their donors and their progression through the organization. And one of the most important parts of the donor pyramid is just segmentation. It's one of the key components to preparing for any fundraising campaign, that you may define your fundraising strategy and end up delivering the right ask to the right person. Traditionally, organizations have focused on donation values and frequency when segmenting their donors amongst the tiers of their donor pyramid. And that's a great place to start. But this method only allows you to define the status quo of your current donors. It does not account for the vast number of prospective donors that are in your midst, nor does it really look to the hidden potential of your existing donors. Next slide, please. Now, each of your donors and the prospects that you have access to has the potential for something even greater. And when you embrace the donor pyramid, you can bring out its true purpose by identifying those who are sitting there with unmet potential. We're finding unmet potential, and I'll talk about this later in some practical examples, in newsletter list subscribers who have never been donors but becoming donors, valuable new donors that are your first-time donors that can become really good recurring donors, or recurring donors that can become your best lifetime donors. The list goes on, and the possibilities are immense, especially as you start to dig in and really harness the information you have about your donors. Next slide, please. Now, one of the hardest parts of getting to know the greatest potential of your donors is how to approach them. And it can be answered through understanding just 3 simple questions. Number 1, who is your perfect donor? Or what does your ideal donor look like? Not every organization wants to focus or calls their perfect donor their major gift donors. For some people, it's building up a recurring monthly donation base. For others, it's taking a look at people who have donated multiple years in a row and continue to grow with the organization. Each organization has to define what their perfect donor looks like. Then the second is, what message is going to resonate best with them? We've got to get the right message to the right person. And how do you ensure, thirdly, that the message you send is going to resonate enough that it causes them to engage and become your perfect donor? It's no longer enough to just deliver the right message to the right person. In today's technology age, we have to deliver the right message to the right person in the right medium that they're going to consume it and then act upon it. Being able to answer these questions confidently is the holy grail of fundraising and exactly why we're here today. Next slide, please. Now, the first step of making this all happen is making the impossible possible. It's harnessing power of something today that you have not previously. The analogy I like to use is, this Earth has been rotating around the sun for 4.5 billion years. 4.5 billion years, and only in the last 100 was the first patent filed for solar power. And it's only in the past few decades that we've really started to harness that solar power. Quite analogous, nonprofits have been sitting on donor data for years, decades, but it's only in the past few years that they've really started to look at the potential of harnessing it, and some are not harnessing it to their max potential. As you know, your organization's most powerful resources are truly going to be your donors. They're what give you the power to meet your mission to the fullest. But the challenge is you most likely don't know much about your current donors. Almost every organization I've worked with when I first walked in, what they knew was their first name, last name, an email address, a postal address, and maybe historical transactions that they had about the individual. And that makes it really difficult to really hone in on who these people are and to personalize your outreach to them. Thankfully, in the past decade or two, there have been some significant advancements in technology that allow you to take a different approach now. And with the nonprofit space, if there's lemonade to be made out of lemons of the pandemic, nonprofits, I feel, have accelerated more around the technology adoption curve in the past 2 years than they did the past 20 years. And that's good news for nonprofits. Now, this new technology is granting you access to patterns, behaviors, and passions that matter most to your donors, and doing it all at lightning speed, compressing that 3 months of work down to just hours so you can spend more time really focused in engaging your donors. So what's the exciting new revolutionary technology, you may ask? Next slide, please, Melissa. Well, it's predictive fundraising. Predictive fundraising allows you to take a huge leap in donor intelligence to identify emerging donation opportunities, improve your donor pyramid progression, and really personalize your communications. It allows you to know your donors in a much more granular level so that you can determine where they really belong in your donor pyramid and develop an ultra-targeted list based on each donor segment that you want to approach. Having a clear understanding of where your donors belong in the donor pyramid and where they have the most potential to grow to allows you to begin pushing them through the pyramid with confidence. And at the same time, weeding out those people who really don't belong in your donor pyramid. Next slide, please. So if we go back to the donor pyramid and look at it, what if you could discover key donor traits at each donor tier? Let's start at the bottom with your prospects. Now being able to go past that just list of names and email addresses and donation amounts, and being able to identify affinities to detect those who truly care about your cause, like veterans causes, children's causes, animal causes. Or looking at first-time donors, moving up a rung in the donor pyramid. Again, being able to identify interests and affinities, but then giving capacities to ensure that as you're trying to progress that donor to the next tier, you're approaching the right people with the right ask. And then moving up a little bit further to recurring and annual donors, being able again to determine who you should focus those tiers on and drive a larger, more frequent gift, and identifying again, interest, affinities, but now adding in wealth information and household demographics at each donor level. And then, of course, there's always the focus on major gifts, being able to key in on financial signals and ensure you're maximizing the gift of each individual, but you don't limit it to just wealth data. Instead of just looking at, what you want to do is look at other exogenous factors, such as spending traits, donations to other like causes, and not over-indexing on wealth. I know I don't look it. I'm originally from Hawaii. I go to family reunions. People think I'm the hired help because I don't look like any of my cousins. But many of my cousins have lived in the same house for 5 generations. And so when they get looked at through wealth rating tools, they often get put in as a major gift donor. What you really want to do is look at how is that individual's current giving capacity. My cousins every year, unfortunately, get hit up by some charities they care a lot about for a major gift, and it scares them away. Whereas had they looked at what their true spending capacity or giving capacity was, they probably would have made a really good $25 or $50 a month donor and become a really dedicated recurring donor. And then, of course, at the top of the pyramid, you're looking at planned gift donors, being able to determine amongst all of your current donors who has the greatest potential for planned giving by identifying age, affinities, financial signals, and their current dedication to your cause. There are so many other traits you can learn about your donors and specific to your organization's mission. And you can even create unique and detailed personas at each tier to find more donors who look just like those individuals as you prospect. Sometimes being able to jump people into your donor pyramid rather than just having to wait for them to enter at the bottom and kind of move them up slowly as we used to do decades ago. Now, it's worth noting that not every single donor has growth potential. And that's what these insights give you. There's a great statistic that was really part of the genesis of Boodle, that 80% of all first-time donors don't come back. But a development director in the past was never going to let a first-time donor go until they definitively knew they weren't coming back, which meant that development teams were wasting 80% of their time. Now, with these insights, you can really start to weed that 80% out and allow your development team to really focus on that 20% who's going to be there for the lifetime of your organization. Next slide, please. Now, by creating personalized and curated messaging that truly speaks to your supporters is become much easier. When I started fundraising, we started out with 2 modes of communication to our donors. We had direct mail and we had phone. I guess a third was your annual rubber chicken dinner that you would do. But that was it. Now today, with all the various means of communication, you really need to narrow in and uncover what's the preferred channel that's best going to allow you to target each individual. And again, going back to what we talked about before, delivering the message to them and the means that they want to consume it and is going to cause them to act. You can use newly emerging advertising methods as well. So beyond your typical social media, phone, text, mail, email, you can now look at household and device ID targeting. You can do over-the-top television ads, banner ads, and video, all straight to an individual's most loved device, the place where they spend most of their time. And by connecting with them in that way, you're able to unlock greater potential and potentially get people who might not have come on otherwise. I'm not a person who's ever responded to direct mail piece. Most direct mail goes from my mailbox into the recycle bin. But there are other forms of media that may get me to pull in, click on a link, look at something a little bit longer, and potentially become an advocate for that organization. Next slide, please. Now, all of this is great in theory. Most people want to see the practical application of how it works. And we're fortunate enough to have a few clients that have allowed us to do case studies with them and share what we've done with them in practical application. Now, in the pandemic, we saw a great rise of food bank clients. And that's partly because, and I look at it in a positive way, we saw a great number of Americans just coming together and inundating food banks with donations. The problem was most of these food banks didn't grow their development teams. And so we worked closely with the North Texas Food Bank, which did see a mass influx of new donors, but was really concerned about those 80% of donors who were never going to come back. The people who were inspired in the moment, not necessarily have an affinity towards food banks, but felt a calling because of everything that was going on in the pandemic. So as they looked out and they wanted to reach out and look at all of the data that they had access to, plus bring in other third-party data to really help them understand and foster relationships to detect who their best donors were out of all those new first-time donors. So what they focused in on were small gift donors that could be approached in very different ways compared to major gift donors and mid-level donors, and being able to break those out and segment them. So when they went to a donor, they didn't want to just settle for the fact this person falls in the 20%. They wanted to be able to say, I want to approach this person on a major gift path. You're obviously not going to ask a first-time donor for a major gift right away, but there's a path of progression you go. Whereas you might approach somebody for a lower donation more quickly. So they sought out ways to determine how do you tier those people out. And in doing so, they were able to create custom models that allowed them to model their current donors in each one of those segments and then apply them to all of these first-time donors. And when they applied these custom models, they were able to get scores for their new donors, ultimately defining which tier each new first-time donor fell into. And while also ruling out those who weren't likely to come back, again, removing some of the stress on the development team of feeling like they might have lost a donor, whereas they were able to focus on those that were most likely to fall into that donor segment. When they targeted the new donors with these personalized messages, so putting the major gift donors on a major gift path, talking to a potential recurring donor about signing up for recurring donations, and hitting each one of them in their major channels, they saw a significant increase in results of people falling into those segments and continuing now that they're in their second year, continuing down that path in the donor pyramid. Next slide, please. The next organization I really like is the Charity Navigator, because so many organizations do focus on major gift fundraising. And the first engagement we did with Charity Navigator was focused on major gifts. We call it hidden gems. Hidden gems typically applies to major gifts, but it could apply if gems to you are monthly recurring donors or donors who are going to grow with you. It can apply in the same way. But in the case of Charity Navigator, they had an expansive donor list that they first needed to identify who their best donors were. So they were able to upload all of their major gift donors and then build a custom model around what their best major gift donors were. So not simply satisfying with what does a good major gift donor to charity look like, but what does a good major gift donor to Charity Navigator look like? And then what they were able to do is fold in almost 2,000 people who had donated less than $100 to them over the past decade. And when they did so, what they found was they increased that bucket of people by 42%. And they received one of the first phone calls they made, they received a $20,000 donation from someone who up till that point had only been donating $100 a year. Next slide, please. The last organization that is fond to my co-founder and I as West Point grads is the Air Force Academy Foundation. They were actually one of our very first clients, our first university client. And what they wanted to do was run a direct mail campaign to start to see who might be most likely to respond to direct mail. And we really enjoyed our work with them because they built a model. They used a couple of our instant prediction models as well to really narrow in on who are the people most likely to respond. And we scored them for them. And we told them everybody that's a 59 and below, you shouldn't send direct mail to. Everybody that's a 60 and above, you should. And in their first year, they told us they were running quarterly campaigns. They thanked us for the recommendations. And then without telling us, they still mailed everybody. But what was great about it is we had live feedback at the end of the year. And what we got back was they were able to show us how not one of the 59 and below people actually responded to the direct mail, but that the 60s and above did. But now what's really exciting is they didn't lose those people who are 59 and below, because what they were able to do was use the other predictive models on how people might respond to email, how people might respond to text, how people might respond to phone. And now the development team was able to look at and engage those people in a method they were more likely to respond with. And they saw increased donations on the direct mail side, 6x increase in response to their year-on-year giving. Next slide, please. As you can see, leveraging predictive fundraising can truly move your donors to new levels and maximize their potential, increasing loyalty, driving higher value donations, and adding more of the right donors to your donor pyramid. So your development team is not beleaguered down with that 80% of people who are not likely to come back anyways. The beauty of predictive fundraising is that your campaign garners you results, and you're able to feed them back into your workflow and continue improving. That's the machine learning aspect of it. So as that first campaign starts to yield results, it feeds back into the algorithm, making your algorithm unique to your organization stronger and stronger as the organization grows. Next slide, please. So many people like to talk about the future of fundraising. We like to say the today of fundraising. And by adding tools that we discussed into your workflows, they're certain to see amplified results. So Melissa, thank you so much for allowing me the time to walk through this, and I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so everyone, please feel free to either drop in the chat or in the Q&A if you have any questions for Shawn that we can get answered. Just wanted to also share, while we're waiting for anyone to ask any questions, the results of the poll that everyone answered on the incoming. And it looks like, about 50% of you answered, which was awesome. And it looks like a lot of people were kind of split between either they don't use the user pyramid or they primarily use it for A, B, and C. So I think this really, with the number of people not using the donor pyramid, I think this was a great outline of how you can use it and how it can be so important to your fundraising efforts, like Shawn talked about, to just increase those results. All right, so we've got the first question, Shawn. Somebody asked, do you have any tips for startups? What are some best practices to start building your donor pyramid if you don't already have one?
I love the question. And part of the genesis of Boodle was there's 1.5 million nonprofits in this country, and we didn't want to cater to a segment of them. So we have worked with organizations that are startups. We also have worked with organizations that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars every year. And that was how we wanted to have the platform be able to be interacted with. At the startup side, I started my own nonprofit 20 years ago. And so I know the pains of the lack of technology that existed today. And a lot of what went into this product was designed to help those organizations. So if you've got some data, you've got some donors, the platform's ready to deliver personas, deliver insights so that you can start to learn a little bit more about the people you want to go after more. If you're truly I just filed my 501c3 status and I'm going out and getting my first donors, we have built an instant prediction library that now has 50 instant prediction models. We'll announce next month we've actually adding another 50. And before the end of the year, we'll have 150. And the reason these are valuable is the majority of these have actually been thought of by our clients. So we've had clients who have come to us and said, well, can you predict an affinity for children's causes? Can you predict an affinity for healthcare causes? And we go into our database, not our clients' data, but the database we own of all 240 million adult Americans. And we're then able to dig in and learn more. And if we've got the data available, typically takes us about 2 to 4 weeks to build that model, and we put it into our library. So that nascent organization, they know what they're going after. If we've got a prediction model in there that helps them, we can overlay that on a prospect list. And we also work with partners who can help them build those prospect lists. But instead of going to a typical list provider and saying, hey, give me people who are in this age demographic and this income, which there's thousands of people who bought that list, we can start to narrow down based on affinity and other factors and get a more narrowed list that either no one has bought or very few people have bought and solicited from.
Great. And another question that this might, be something more to follow up with after the webinar, but, how would a nonprofit get started with boodle.ai? What type of investment is that for the organization?
Yeah, so we purposely priced this, or we tried to price it as low as possible for people to get on. One of my favorite examples, we have a veterans organization on the East Coast, and their initial license, and they just did a very small test, their initial license was $2,000. And they got on and within 2 weeks saw results. And they were so enamored with the results, they decided to put more of their records in. And they went up to, I think, a $7,000 license. And this is a large organization. Within 3 months, they saw such tremendous results. They put all of their records in and went up to an $81,000 license. We have people who are on the platform and started on the platform and saw results for less than $5,000. We have enterprise clients that are in 6-figure licenses. But we designed it so people could get on, use it, see value, and essentially grow out of found money rather than having to go back to the budget to try and cut things to accommodate the platform.
Great. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Melissa, why people might put, I'll add one other thing outside of the investment costs on the startup is There's also the speed with which you can get started. The Charity Navigator example I gave, it literally took them minutes to download the list from their CRM, upload it to the platform. Within 8 hours, they had the model built, and it was then on their team to reach out and call. And they got that first donation, that $20,000 donation I mentioned, within 2 weeks of having been on the platform. So it's very simple and easy to use. When we started this 6 years ago, I sat down with my development team and I said, assume that our end user knows how to Google, watch Netflix, and order on Amazon. Can't be any harder. And we've accomplished that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. A follow-up question to that was, do you offer a free trial, or, is there a way to like demo how it would work for the organization?
Absolutely do demos. Our sales team will sit down any day of the week, walk through the platform. We can even go so far as giving you what we call a sandbox for a week with dummy data in it so that you can fool around a little bit. We've moved past, because we've got major organizations that have used the platform with success. We've moved away from the free trial, but we've also priced it low enough that most organizations don't have to go through a huge budget exercise just to get on the platform with an initial test to see some success.
Great. So I'm not really seeing any other questions. But Shawn, I just wanted to thank you so much. So I come from the nonprofit world. Before I joined DipJar, I actually worked in the nonprofit field in marketing and development. So I personally, this is super interesting to me, and I see such value here, learning more about your donors and really making actionable items from all that. I think is so important for orgs. No matter your size, there's always things to be learned about your donor base and ways to improve. So I think this is such an awesome thing. And I really encourage everyone who joined us today to kind of follow up with this boodle.ai sales team and kind of learn how it could help your organization. I just think it's awesome.
Thanks, Melissa. I appreciate it. I'm proud of what the team has put together, and more than anything, we're just proud of what we get to do every day. As we discussed, there's 1.5 million nonprofits out there, and we want to get into the hands of as many as possible to make their jobs easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with that. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Shawn, thank you so much for spending your time with us this afternoon. And yeah, thank you, everyone. This webinar was recorded, so we will be sure to get this out to you afterwards, in case you missed a few notes here or there, or want to share it with your board or anybody in your nonprofit. We will absolutely make that available to you.
Melissa, thanks so much for the time. I appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for joining. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice afternoon.